Did you know that the rise of a unified Germany and its annexation of French territories after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 completely upset the European balance of power, triggering a dangerous game of alliances that ultimately exploded into World War I? It was an international, brutal conflict between 1914 and 1918, where tensions had been brewing for decades. The catastrophic spark was struck in Bosnia, where the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist struggling to end Austro-Hungarian rule over the region. Instantly, Austria-Hungary, supported by Germany, blamed the Serbian government for the attack and declared war on Serbia. Because Serbia was backed by Russia, which was allied to France, the dominoes fell automatically. Within a single week, World War I unfolded. Germany's initial strategy, known as the Schlieffen Plan, was designed for a high-stakes war on two fronts against France and Russia. The plan was to rapidly concentrate the bulk of its army in the west to defeat France first, then shift forces to the east before Russia could fully mobilize in Asia. But the geopolitical map expanded quickly. The Ottoman Empire, a historic enemy of the Russian Empire, entered the war on the side of Austria-Hungary and Germany, opening critical fronts in the Middle East to control vital access to oil and the Suez Canal. On the ground, the German advance penetrated deep into France, closing in on Paris, but it was dramatically halted at the Battle of the Marne by Franco-British forces. This single defeat meant the absolute end of German plans for a quick victory in France. With no fast solution, both sides dug into trenches, turning the Western Front into a 3-year-long war of attrition. This horrifying dead end saw the first use of chemical weapons and toxic gases. This era became defined by massive clashes, including the brutal battles of Verdun and the Somme on the Western Front, and the huge naval battle of Jutland between the German and British fleets in 1916. It was also a war of rapid technological evolution. The recent invention of aviation was first used for observation, but planes were gradually modified for strategic bombing and air combat. This was a conflict that truly engulfed the planet. Around the world, European colonies and British dominions, such as India, engaged heavily in the war. From 1914 to 1916, Russia's army mounted several offensives on the Eastern Front, but was unable to break through the German lines to support a geographically isolated Russia. To relieve this pressure, Allied forces tried to open a sea supply route via the Dardanelles Strait and later launched a land invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula, but both campaigns failed completely against fierce Ottoman resistance. Meanwhile, Italy, which was initially part of the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, had stayed neutral until 1915, when it suddenly turned against Austria-Hungary to annex new territories. However, the 12 brutal Italian offensives along the Isonzo River yielded little to no result. Looking to recover its own lost Balkan territories, Bulgaria joined the Central Powers in invading Serbia. The battle for survival extended deep into the oceans. The Royal Navy imposed a crushing naval blockade on Germany, while German submarines retaliated by sinking military and commercial ships supplying the Allies, including those coming from the United States. In addition to this submarine warfare, Britain intercepted and transmitted a secret German telegram to Mexico, offering them an alliance against the United States. This shocking intelligence changed everything, forcing the US to officially go to war in 1917. Inside Russia, the lack of advances on the battlefield and catastrophic economic instability exploded in the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. This internal collapse ended Russian involvement in World War I and laid the direct groundwork for the creation of the Soviet Union. Although Russia was now out of the game and Germany could finally focus its entire military might on the Western Front, Berlin was unable to achieve a quick victory against the Allies before the arrival of fresh US troops, despite the earlier Ottoman victory at Gallipoli. The collapse of the Central Powers happened rapidly. Later defeats and a massive Arab revolt backed by the British forced the Turks to sign a treaty with the Allies in October 1918. Moreover, Austria-Hungary was dissolving from within due to growing nationalist movements among its incredibly diverse population, forcing them to reach an armistice. Facing dwindling resources on the battlefield and the complete surrender of its allies, Germany was finally forced to seek an armistice in November 1918, ending World War I. The aftermath of this global disaster remade the human story. World War I helped spread a severe pandemic called the Spanish flu, strengthened America's global economic status, and led to the spectacular fall of 4 large empires. The German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman empires were completely dismantled. From their ashes, entirely new nations were created, including Poland, Finland, Turkey, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. But the peace was fundamentally flawed. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to cut down its army and pay heavy war reparations, as it was considered the sole party responsible for the war damages. This treaty was considered a deep, bitter humiliation by the German people, a grievance that ultimately laid the devastating groundwork for World War II, despite the creation of the League of Nations aimed at promoting global peace. The lines drawn in 1918 would set the stage for the rest of the 20th century.